Take 6. Hello, welcome or welcome back to TSC Talks, the podcast inspired by the condition known as tuberous sclerosis complex. This podcast is developed and produced and owned by Jill Woodworth and Lisa Larson. My name is Jill Woodworth and I am your host, taking the podcast in a broader scope, I guess. Trying to tease out the spokes of the wheel at which TSC is in the hub, the spokes of the wheel reaching outwards to all these systems of care and segments of society with which those who are case managing or diagnosed with a condition will need to either understand, work with, in order to manage this, which can be very complicated condition. So that's the concept, where I'm reaching out to talk to different sectors of society that can be challenging. So tonight on the podcast, my guest is Ricardo Gomez. He is a law enforcement officer in Riverside, California. He has a son with autism. He was all over Facebook. I picked up his post after I had just done the podcast with Chief Snyder and Officer Krause of the New Paltz, New York Police Force, talking about their occupant with autism sticker campaign. I saw Ricardo with his headline, "When Law Enforcement Meets Autism," talking about what happened with his son that was misinterpreted and escalated to a rather serious police involved event, which Ricardo could have. Obviously, he shares his story here. He talks from the heart, from the perspective of a parent as well as a law enforcement officer. He shares viewing the body camera that was on the officer that was interacting with his son. I'm not going to talk much more about it, but his description and narrative is riveting. It's painful to listen to, but it's also inspiring, and I was just blown away by his ability to kind of remain present in both roles while he wasn't directly involved. So he was hearing information from various people, including his wife, this direct support worker, as well as the law enforcement officers, and it's just really a fascinating narrative all the way around, and I'm going to really killing it here, so I'm going to stop talking about it and let Ricardo talk. For that, I want to thank Nikki's Gardens of Hope for sponsoring this episode. Nikki's Gardens of Hope is a project building permanent residences for adults living with IDD and autism. See them at nikkisgardensofhope.com. So we're going to go into the podcast, but I do want to mention that my next guest after Ricardo Gomez, I have Mike Robinson. He is a cannabis activist, talks about his work treated his stepdaughter with autism and epilepsy with CBD and improved qualities of life of many people. So he's on. I'm going to stop talking now. Thanks so much for tuning in again. Take it away, Ricardo. Thank you, Ricardo, for being on my podcast, TSC Talks. I kind of caught you spur of the moment. I was on Facebook and reading. I had just done a podcast with some police officers and reading through my stream, and your post came up about an incident with your son, and I was like, oh my goodness. And so I really appreciate, your willingness to be on and discuss this. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your personal bio, I guess.
Okay. Well, first I want to thank you for inviting me to share my story on your podcast. I'm also glad that you reached out. And I know you said that you came across my post on Facebook, and that was the only reason why I shared that on Facebook, is because I want to encourage and increase conversation so everyone can learn from those experiences. My name is Ricardo. I have a son with autism. He recently turned 18. I've been married to my wife, Amanda, for 23 years. We just celebrated our anniversary.
Oh, congrats.
And thank you. And we also have a 21-year-old daughter. I live in Riverside, California.
Okay.
So I grew up in Mexico. I was born in the United States, but shortly after I was born, my parents decided that they could afford a better style or a better living in Mexico. So we went to live in Mexico, and that's where I lived for 18 years. I attended primary school in Mexico. After sixth grade, I started school in the United States, and I was crossing the border every day to come to school.
Oh my
And
goodness.
being a U.S. citizen, crossing the border was not an issue, but it was definitely a lot of work. It was hard work because we would have to be out of the house at 4 o'clock in the morning
Oh my
because
goodness.
you didn't know if the border was going to take 15 minutes to get across or it was going to take 2 hours.
Wow.
So I think that made me very thankful for education and the opportunities that us as Americans have here in this country. So I grew up very patriotic and just very thankful for what we have.
Oh,
And
I feel that. Haven't talked to someone that's had that experience. So, wow.
like that topic can be a totally different podcast.
Yeah,
right?
I bet. Anyway,
But,
yeah, that's really remarkable. So,
but I think that appreciation for opportunities in life really helped later in life when we learned about autism and we had to accept that that was going to be our life for the rest of our lives.
mm-hmm. So those earlier experiences kind of prepared you in some way for, the endurance test that parenting a child with autism can be.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And after graduating high school, I started attending a college here in Riverside, and that's where I met my wife.
Mm-hmm.
After we both graduated from college, we had established our community and we had our friends. I had my job, and this is where we stayed. And
That's awesome.
Yeah, we'll be here for a few more years, and then we're planning on moving out of California.
Okay. So how did you get into law enforcement?
So life just kind of brought that. I started working for the state government as a tax collector.
Okay.
I was there for a couple years. Then I went to work for the California Department of Justice in a investigative auditor capacity.
Okay.
So that's when I got my taste of investigative work.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
And after a few years working there, I went over to the agency where I currently work now. That is also an agency that administers and collects tax. We have a small criminal investigations unit, and where we investigate tax evasion, tax fraud, white collar crime.
Uh-huh.
So I've been doing that for 13 years with that agency. And once I came over to that agency, that's where I started working in a law enforcement capacity.
Okay.
We're a very small department, but here in California, in order to be at that law enforcement capacity or work at that capacity, we have to go through almost the exact training as the rest of our law enforcement.
Okay.
And our ongoing training is pretty much the same. We have to adhere to the same standards.
So tell me a little bit about your son and, your family and having the diagnosis, I guess.
Sure. I think it'll be important to give a little history. So we learned that our son had autism, or he started displaying signs of something different, quote unquote, at the age of 3. And the things that we noticed was that he was very attached to objects. He started walking on his tippy toes, and he did not keep that eye contact. At first, just like any normal parent, we just started comparing him to his sister, what his sister did or how she behaved at that age.
Yes.
And she has always been very advanced. So us gauging his maturity or his behaviors based on what she did was
your
not
benchmark was a little off.
Nevertheless, we started noticing that compared to other boys his age, he was different. And this was maybe 15 years ago. And you and I know that there's a lot more information about autism nowadays than there was even 10 years ago. So we started asking around. We started asking his teachers and the school psychologists, and no one can give us an answer. I think he was just getting into preschool or getting ready to go into kindergarten. And we started asking his teachers and other people at school, and it just felt like we were getting the runaround. Until one day we asked one of the school professionals, we asked, does he have autism?
You just came out with it. Had you done research and
people started telling us,
uh-huh.
you might want to research this. But prior to that, we had no idea what autism was. So we
that must
just
have been
asked.
Scary.
Oh yeah, it was totally scary. And we asked, does he have autism? And without answering, it was one of those, where she was shaking her head yes, but saying no.
Mixed messages.
And I understood they probably could not diagnose anything, but just with that information, then we were able to do a little bit more work. Some people pointed us to our here's Inland Regional Center, that they're a county agency that works with kids or people with special needs. So they pointed us there. We went to his doctor and they did some audio testing and just to make sure that his hearing was okay. And the reason why he wasn't making eye contact, was not medical. So eventually we got a real diagnosis. But once we had that, then we just felt like at least we had something to work with.
Absolutely.
But it was also very scary.
Yeah.
Because we started doing our research and you and I were saying earlier how the spectrum is very broad.
Yes.
And we didn't know if he was going to be one of those kids who cannot communicate and do not show affection and are stemming all the time. And for those listeners who don't know what stemming is, that is, movements that autistic kids do with their hands to help their anxiety. Well, one of the things my wife and I have learned during this whole period is that we just have to be real and we have to be truthful, and we tell people, Ryan is not normal. And some people look at us and they say, how can you say that? I'm like, well, that's the truth. He's not normal. He's different.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I do.
we really don't get offended when people say, Ryan's not normal. So yeah, we really had a very good support team or support structure.
Network kind of thing. Yeah,
with friends and family and church.
Okay. Church is a big support.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. That's great.
Definitely. And we know that the rate of divorce in families with kids with special needs is
I'm a case study.
Off the hook.
Yeah, it really is. And a lot of my friends and that are special, it's hard.
So we have to be very conscious that this was going to be a hard life. And once we really believed that God gave us Ryan for a reason, he either wanted to teach us something or he wanted to teach other people something through him. And we were the parents he picked for that. Then we were all in.
Yeah. So you get the diagnosis and you've come to this level of acceptance. And, how was his process as far as like the school system? And
the school system was crazy. He was always accepted by friends and family. He's always been a very funny and loving kid. We were very blessed and fortunate that he was not a violent child growing up, because you see a lot of that. Kids with autism or other special needs, that they just grow up very violent because they don't know how to process emotion.
Absolutely.
And so Ryan has always been very loving and affectionate and friendly. So I think that really helped with other kids his age and the people around us.
Tell me about like him as a person.
He started talking a little bit later than most kids, but once he started talking, he never
that's so funny. That's my daughter. I was like, I don't know why I ever wanted her to start talking.
There are days when we tell him, Ryan, you've used all your words for today, buddy. And
I like that.
So he loves Disney, and because we live here in California, we go to Disney a lot. And we think is weird that he likes going there, because one of his triggers is loud noises and kids crying. And if you've ever been to Disneyland, there's a lot of that.
It's like what it is.
Yes. But I don't know if the rest of Disneyland pretty much suppresses those feelings that annoy him.
Very interesting.
I also think that he likes the order. If you go to Disneyland, there's a lot of order. Everything is always in the same place, and you know what to expect.
True.
He loves movies. He also likes to draw.
Awesome.
Yeah, so he likes doing a lot of things.
He's got some really like a variety of things that he's into.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And he's 18 now, but we think he probably behaves at a maybe 12-year-old level. And
I dislike that we have to put these numbers on it, but I do the same thing just so people can understand, because I feel like, there's so much more to our young people than a number, and there's so many aspects that can't be tested. But so his school, you said it was kind of crazy. And
school was a challenge. We really had to fight the school system all the time because we felt like we knew what our kid needed as far as, resources in order for him to learn the most. And it was always, those IEPs were always difficult. And in the beginning, my wife left the IEPs in tears. Yeah. And then we just realized that, hey, this is going to be a fight, and we have to be ready to do everything we can for our kid. And we have to be united. And even if we go inside, or if we go in there and we play good cop and bad cop, you being the one that cries and me being the one that has the stern voice, then we just have to do that.
Yes.
But we just learned to navigate the system and knew what resources were available. And it was hard work because they don't tell you what's available. It's like you have to.
They don't want you to know, because then you're going to ask for it and it costs money.
Exactly. And
I know.
We always say, I wish there was a manual that lists all the resources available from the school system, from the resource centers, but there's not. So he went through school. At the same time, we navigated how it was dealing with the school system. Earlier this year, he graduated from high school.
Did he?
And yes, and I use that term graduated very loosely. You and I know that's just, it doesn't really mean much.
That's the dance they want us to do.
Yeah. All that means is that he did well in his special ed classes and that he met the minimum. And he was always a very good student. And where he had a little bit of trouble in high school was with those kids who were bullying. But we went in right away and put a stop to that.
How did you do that? Did you have a meeting?
We scheduled a meeting with the principal and, just went in and said, hey, our kid is here going to school and learning. You need to remove anything that prevents them from doing that, including bullying. And we don't care what you do, but you need to give them that environment that allows them to do that.
Right.
So, we knew the whole school administration knew who we were. So, he graduated earlier this year, and that cost another time of fear and anxiety because we did for us. For us.
For you guys.
Because we didn't know what was next. He couldn't go into the workforce.
Right.
We tried going through the Department of Rehab, and we were told that he was unemployable. The regional center provided information on work programs that Ryan could be a part of.
Like integrated work training where they're like going out in groups to job site with coach and and that came into play after he left high school, and that's what he's doing now. How's it going?
Yeah, so it was going great until Friday, August 16th.
Yes.
Which brings us to the incident that allowed us to connect through on my Facebook post.
Yes, and I'm sorry that you've had to go through this, but God bless you for being willing to put it out there. So tell me what happened.
So yes, Ryan is part of a work program where he goes out into the community and does volunteer work. So I think different businesses contract with this program. So they allowed these special needs, I want to call them kids because he'll always be my kid, but young men and women to come in and experience what it is doing work and following direction and just give them an opportunity to be out in the community. Yes.
Yeah.
He's been doing this with a job coach and 2 other young men. And it's been great.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
he loves it.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And that's what he was doing the morning of August 16th.
Uh-huh.
Their routine is that early in the morning, they go to a park just so they can walk around, I don't know, enjoy the morning,
Yeah.
get a little bit of exercise. And then after they spend some time at a park, they go to these different businesses. So that morning, he was at the park. And before I tell you this story, I think it's important to clarify that the information that I have received, or I got the information from different eyewitnesses and doing my research by communicating with the law enforcement department that was involved, because I was not there.
Right.
So the story is that there was a family there, specifically a mother and a child.
Mm-hmm.
And from what they say, the child was acting up.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember me telling you that crying in loud kids was something that really triggers my son. So in order to deal with those feelings and that situation, Ryan picked up pine cones that were on the ground and started tossing them down. I have
distracting himself.
Just distracting himself and what we call stemming, just trying
kind of coping.
Just coping with it.
Yeah.
And we have never seen him toss or throw something at anyone with the intent to hurt them. And he was throwing pine cones at the ground, maybe throwing them out, and
just tossing pine cones. Yeah.
Tossing pine cones. And one of those pine cones landed close to the mom and son. The lady got aggravated and told Ryan that she was going to call the police because he tried to hit his son. From what I heard, she started using profanity and yelling. We don't yell or use profanity at our home. So to Ryan, I think that was
scary.
Something scary. Yes, that's the right word. That was scary.
Yeah.
And he got very agitated. I would imagine that her son was probably crying. She was yelling. She was threatening him, telling him that he was going to go to jail.
So he's getting all more and more agitated and revved up.
Yeah.
Like I can feel that the way you're telling me, like picturing this.
Oh, yeah. The job coach said that he tried to intervene and explain the situation to the lady, but she just wouldn't have it. I was working from home that day, and I get this call from my wife saying that Ryan is at the park and he's being arrested and he's being put in the back of a police vehicle. So I go out and started heading that way. My wife gets there. I'm still not at the park. She is a lot closer. She gets there. And when she gets there, Ryan is already in handcuffs in the back of the vehicle. And she's not allowed to talk to him. And I'm on the phone when they take off. And I keep telling her, just tell them to wait for me. Just tell them to wait for me. And they don't. And they take Ryan. And she says, they just gave me an address of where they're going to take him. And the card or the address is to this medical facility. She says they tell me that he needs to get a psychological evaluation, and they're just going to take him there. So I think for a parent, that is the worst situation, right? To know that your kid is being handcuffed, put into the back of a police vehicle, and being driven away.
Because you're in their head at that point, and you're like, you know how that, I mean, well, you don't know for sure what it's like to be them, but being the parent, you know that that's suffering.
Yeah. Now imagine what it is if you're the parent of a kid with special needs.
Yeah.
Right?
Like,
all I kept thinking about is, what is he feeling right now? Is he
yes.
hurt? Is he scared? Is he angry? Is he out of control? Is he calm? We had no idea. So we head out to this medical facility, and Ryan doesn't show up. And we were there for over an hour.
Oh boy.
And during that time, I'm on the phone with different law enforcement contacts and dispatch, trying to find out where my son is.
Uh-huh.
You know, by that time I was there with my wife, and I met her at the facility.
Mm-hmm.
Later we learned that they didn't take him to that facility. They took him to a facility in another city. So
Wow.
we started heading that way. And luckily I was able to get on the phone with that medical facility. I got on the phone with the nurse. Because Ryan is now 18, they wouldn't let me talk to him.
Uh-huh.
And I just used, my
persuasion
to say, look, lady, my child has autism. He's probably scared. I know he's 18, but he just doesn't know what's going on. I said, can you at least ask if he would like to talk to me? And the nurse was very friendly and nice and helpful. And she says, okay, I understand. Let me ask him. He's right here. And she says, Ryan, is your parents, do you want to talk to them? And he goes, no. And on the phone, I'm like, Brian, don't say that. And, but I knew he didn't want to talk to us because he thought he was going to be in trouble with us. I was going to
say, he thought he was in trouble. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I tell the nurse, he just thinks he's in trouble with us. And he does not want to hear us tell him that we're disappointed or that he is in trouble.
Right.
So tell him it's his dad and that he's not in trouble, that I just want to make sure that he's okay.
Yep.
And she explained that, and then Ryan agreed to talk to me. So I was able to hear that he was okay and that he was not scared or crying. And
what a relief at that point.
Yeah, that was a big relief.
Yeah.
I think I went from speeding to speed limit,
after, like almost okay. Well, now he's okay. What we can deal with what's next. He's okay.
Right. He's okay. We just need to get there.
Yeah.
So we get there and he looks all beat up.
Boy.
They gave him something to calm him down, which I think was good. He had bruises. He had a black eye.
Oh my goodness.
He ended up with a fractured nose. So as a parent, I'm furious.
I feel it right now. Oh boy.
I'm furious. And I just want to find out who did this to my son.
Right.
And I want to go do the same to them. But then my training and my experience tells me that there's a lot more to this story.
Okay.
I think nowadays a lot of people just rely on little pieces of information.
I so agree. It's not a Facebook post. You need to dig deeper.
You need to find out what happened.
Yeah.
And so I still had those angry feelings.
Right. Of course you did. You'd be like superhuman if you didn't.
I think when you're a parent of a child with special needs, there's always that feeling where you second guess yourself and you say, did I do enough for my kid? Am I doing enough? And that was one of those moments.
I guess that's what I meant when I said back there, like you're always judging yourself.
You are.
You really are. It's so hard. But yeah, so you're questioning yourself. And
yes.
Yeah.
So like I said, I knew there was more information.
Yeah.
So instead of throwing up a Facebook post saying how mad I was at the police,
right.
The police beat up my son.
Which would have been easy.
Would have been easy, and a lot of people do it. This is my son. I can't believe they do that with a child with autism.
Right.
I got on the phone with the local sheriff, who is a personal friend, and I said, hey, this happened to my son. Can we find out what happened? And he said, yeah, let me take a look, and I will get back to you in a couple of days. And so my wife and I just kind of took a step back.
Yep.
And just kind of trusted that people that we knew and we trusted were going to help us get the right information. Sometimes writing for me is therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I threw up the first Facebook post
Mm-hmm.
that you read.
Yes, it was very well written, by the way.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Where I did my best to communicate my feelings and the questions that I had without bashing law enforcement, because I did not have all of the information. Being in law enforcement makes me see things a different way. And I think our police is so misunderstood and hated nowadays.
I have had a huge bias until I really got involved and talked to some police officers and really had my perspective changed. I don't think we know, I guess making decisions in a split second in the heat of the moment, really is got to be challenging, especially in today's climate. When they're probably always being second guessed, no matter what. So,
and you do have your bad apples.
Of course.
But those are a very small percentage of the whole law enforcement community. And having gone through the training and experience, I can tell you that the standards that we have to adhere to, or the trainings that we have to go through, is second to none. It's hours and hours of scenarios. And
really?
Yes.
Oh, I believe you. I'm interested. Yeah. That's probably another podcast, so I won't ask you about that too much, but that's good to know.
So you have those bad apples, and I think sometimes we judge, or people judge the whole law enforcement just by what we hear and see. So I threw that post.
Yes, post.
Being careful not to bash law enforcement. And just the support and love that we got from friends and family was tremendous. People who know who Ryan is, and they knew that there was something that wasn't making sense, reached out. And now
were people encouraging you to you got to fight that kind of
Yeah, I had a few conversations where I had to tell people, settle down, hold on.
I bet. Yeah.
Just because I'm sharing some facts right now doesn't mean that is the whole story.
It's good to know you have a lot of support, though, in moments like that, but it takes a lot of clear-headedness to not want to, go there.
Right. So in that post, I just raised some questions that I had the intention of seeking and getting answers to. We waited for about a week, and then we heard back from our sheriff's department, and they were very, very helpful and transparent. And
now, what happened with Ryan? He went to a facility to be medically cleared.
Right. So he was checked into a medical facility on a 5150 hold. Here in California, there is a health and safety code that allows law enforcement to check in someone at the facility if we believe that they're in danger to themselves or others.
Okay.
And it's a period of time where they hold them there. Because we came and we explained everything, and they really understood the situation. Yeah. He was only there for a couple hours. They allowed us to take him home. He's a very innocent kid, and he doesn't hold many grudges. So he bounced back very fast.
Thank God for small miracles.
Yeah. And that morning, his program manager called me, or not that morning, but Monday morning, after that weekend, his program manager called me and asked how Ryan was doing, and was asking she wanted to know when he was ready to come back to work. And I told her, Ryan is dressed and ready to go.
Good.
So,
right back. Probably for the best.
Right back.
Didn't miss a beat.
That weekend we had a lot of conversations as to, I wanted to hear from him how he was feeling about what happened. And I know that Ryan probably put up a fight because he was panicked
Mm-hmm.
and scared, and he was fighting for his life,
Mm-hmm.
not understanding exactly what was going on.
Yeah, a
And
total stress trauma response.
yeah,
Yeah.
and being in law enforcement, I know, and we've been trained that when we have to detain or arrest someone, we need to do everything possible to control the situation.
Uh-huh.
So,
Of course.
so I knew his injuries were a result of other decisions that happened
Right.
that morning that I, at the time, was not privy to. But yes, thank you for asking. Ryan was fine, and he just bounced right back. So later that week, we heard from our sheriff's department, and I was allowed to come and review the body cam that one of the sergeants was wearing that day. And that was very eye-opening to me because I was able to see the other side.
Huh. Wow.
I was able to see
That must have been tough.
what it was very tough.
Yeah. But good to
wife,
be able to see it.
Yes, my wife said that she's glad it was me who went and not her because she was still having a hard time processing the feelings
Absolutely.
she felt as a mother, and she probably wouldn't have enjoyed seeing what was going on with Brian that day. Mm-hmm. I didn't enjoy it, but I think my training makes me a little bit more understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to see the body cam, and I learned several things. I learned that the call to 911 and how these deputies were dispatched, or the call came in as a assault with a deadly weapon.
Wow.
So
for pine cones.
For pine cones. With the state of the world right now and all these shootings going on,
yes,
a call of
course,
assault with a deadly weapon is not something to take lightly.
Mm-hmm.
So these deputies went out, more than one, and they were
like a whole SWAT team.
They were rolling code 3 with lights and sirens.
Oh boy!
I believe there was 3 or 4 deputies, but now I understand why.
How did it get coded as a assault with a deadly weapon? Was that just lost in the translation?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I still want to hear the call.
Yeah.
And that's one of my next steps. I want to hear the 911 call. I want to hear what was said. And I don't want to do it just so I can blame someone.
Of course not.
I just want to know it.
You want to know.
I just want to know.
To understand, where are there
understand.
These holes that could possibly be addressed in, or lots of people communicating. I mean, there's bound to be a miscommunication, it seems, in stress, how to avoid. But the call got coded or however you refer to it as that escalation.
Assault with a deadly weapon. I think they called it a level 4. And I don't work patrol, so I don't know all that.
I have no idea.
Lingo. Another thing that I learned from meeting with the deputies was that, and after watching the probably 15 minutes of video that was recorded, no one mentioned autism.
Really?
Like the word autism was never mentioned.
Yeah, I read that in your post.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they referred to my son as mentally disabled, but that can mean many things.
Yes, it can. Broader.
Even my wife, when she was there, she never mentioned autism because she assumed that someone else had said it already. And that was very important because I believe, and the deputies believe, that would have changed things completely.
Just by knowing. Yeah, I hear you.
One of my questions I had in the beginning was, why didn't they just give Ryan time to chill? The job coach knew he didn't have a weapon. He knew that he just needed to calm down. Why didn't they just give him time to chill? What's the rush? Without me knowing that they were heading to the park expecting an assault with a deadly weapon. And without me knowing that they never learned that he had autism. Another thing that I learned was that one of the deputies realized that something was not right.
Mm-hmm.
And he began talking to Ryan in a calm voice.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see in the video that Ryan is reacting to that. He was saying, hey, buddy, just come to us. Come down.
Yep.
We just want to help you. Something like that. And he was reacting to that. And he started coming down to the point where he was very close to one of the deputies. And I know that for officer safety, it was probably the best thing to do was to handcuff my son until we learned what was going on. But as soon as he saw those handcuffs come out, he freaked out and started running back to the area on top of the playground, the slide area where he was secluding himself. Once there was contact and once they were that close, they now had to go in and control the situation.
Uh-huh. So they had to grab him.
Yeah. At that point, he was so flustered again, and they just had to go control the situation and make sure they handcuffed him and detained him to really know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And watching that altercation was not enjoyable, but it answered a lot of questions. Because Ryan did fight. He did resist arrest because he did not want to be in trouble. He didn't want to go to jail. In a weird way, I'm very thankful for the deputies, because once they had handcuffed him, they identified that there's something more than there's something more. We have to find out what's going on.
Right. They knew it wasn't the typical situation.
Right. The deputy said that he knew his intent was not to hurt police, and his intent was not to resist arrest and fight, that he was just scared.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of doing what they would normally do with a normal adult, which would be filing charges for resisting arrest and in physical altercation with police, they decided to have him looked at. And that's when they decided to check him in under a 5150.
Okay.
Which makes sense.
It does
but
make
again,
sense.
As a parent, it's just so
overwhelming.
It's just so hard to understand and overwhelming. So, because I wanted to be fair to them and I wanted to paint both sides of the picture, that's when I shared my second post, where I outlined what I had learned from the meeting with the deputies. That day, I also had the opportunity to bring Ryan with me and
I read that,
and recreate that experience of him interacting with the deputies.
Oh, wow.
In a positive way.
How did he respond when you asked him to come to meet the police officers?
He was a bit apprehensive. He was asking if he was going to go to jail. And I think I read that Ryan likes to pick his outfits for the next day. And the night before, he pulled out a shirt that was black and white vertical stripes.
Oh, boy.
And he said, Dad, I'm definitely not wearing this because they might think that I escaped from jail or something like that. So I had to assure him that it was going to be okay. And like I said, I just wanted to recreate that interaction in a positive way and hopefully erase some of his trauma and memories that he had from that day. Because even though he just bounced back and went back to work, I don't know what he was storing inside.
Of course.
And what feelings he was just keeping in there, that I wanted to do everything possible to help fix those or erase those.
Yes.
And the interaction with them was very good.
Yeah.
We even talked about what he needs to do next time he sees law enforcement, and we got to practice. And
so you role played, kind of.
We role played, yeah. And I'm still not done. I still want to, get some friends in uniform to come to my home and reenact something and teach my son that we can trust him.
That would be a great way to do some training with parents is to act out this kind of a scenario. I don't know, maybe that's too heavy for a training, but just what made you think of that? Was that based on like your own training? Like, you need to process an incident in some way, and sometimes by investigating further, it kind of gives you a little bit more, I don't know, compassion or broader understanding of the situation.
Sure. Well, a few years ago, I was involved in a ministry at church where we dealt with, we call it a healing ministry, where we met with people that have experienced trauma throughout their life.
Okay.
Such as physical, sexual abuse, death. And our goal was not to say, you shouldn't be hurting, but instead say, how can we help you work through this? And one of the things that we learned while doing that is that we store memory episodically. So I learned that from reading different books. And one of the things that helped us work with these individuals is to go back to that time, to think back and replace some of those memories with something good, if possible. I know there are some traumatic moments or experiences that are very hard to forget.
Yeah.
But if we can go back and replace that memory with something positive, I'm hoping that it would have a good outcome, then that would be great. And that's something that I've tried to do with Ryan.
Okay. That's just how you kind of brought that into play right at this. I mean, it just kind of you were prepared in some ways for this. Yeah. So the best thing that came out of this experience is knowing that there is a big need out there. Yeah.
There is a big need for training. And when you hear me say that, you would think that I'm thinking about training for law enforcement. I think that training for law enforcement is important. We do get some of the training, and I think ongoing training is paramount, especially because the rate of autism is just rising.
Yeah, totally.
But I think there's not enough training for the community and people who live with and work with children with special needs on how to tactically communicate with law enforcement.
Yeah. In this day and age in particular, I think. Yeah. And I know that sometimes I've heard this playing devil's advocate in some communities that, well, why do we have to do that? Why they should be more proactive? But how would you address that? I mean, in my mind, I would say, well, that's probably a big ask. So what can we do to bridge that gap? And
I think the work of law enforcement is hard enough that any help we can give them on how to assess a scene or a situation is huge.
Okay.
So what I'm envisioning is some type of community tactical communication training for special needs. And one of the pastors at our church approached me and he said, hey, what do you think about this? He said, what about having a training like that where police comes and they tell us how to communicate with them when a situation like this happens?
Yeah.
So that is in the works right now.
Oh, and, beautiful.
The sheriff's department agreed to work with me on putting something like that together.
Oh, good.
I think it's important to know what to do and what not to do when interacting with law enforcement. And those are the things that we saw and those opportunities that we saw in hindsight when debriefing this whole situation.
Yes.
I think it would have made a lot of difference if when the deputies arrived to the park, someone would have been loud enough to say, this kid is autistic. He has no weapons. All he needs is time to cool down. I think that would have changed the situation a little bit. I think the training can also be extended to the work coaches or
disabilities organizations that are involved with this population.
Yes, the job coaches and in those programs on how to advocate for
Mm-hmm.
their clients in situations like these.
Mm-hmm.
So, in summary, I think this situation just helped open up a lot of opportunities and gave us a lot of ideas on what we can do to avoid these type of situations. I mean, the last thing we want is for our sons and daughters to get hurt, or
Yes.
for anyone to get hurt.
Right.
So the more we can do to work better with law enforcement and just avoid situations like that is great.
Yeah, what a turnaround, and using a very terrifying experience for
Mm-hmm.
educating and awareness. Wow. Yeah, I'm taking away a lot. I mean, making mental notes as you're talking about just, I guess I never thought of that idea where the police officers are coming in, and it's kind of like a interchange of information in a lot of ways, but kind of
With it,
knowing there's so much. I, as a parent, and not being involved in law enforcement at all, and having some negative experiences with my own kids that were
mm-hmm.
misinterpretations, I just was really a lot of animosity and really just probably just fear. So I think anything to empower the parents of special needs kids is helpful, and with you being being in both roles is a double bonus. So I am just really grateful for you and for Brian and your wife, and being willing to put this out there, Ricardo, because I think you're helping a ton of people. In fact, someone else I know said, "Did you see that Facebook post?" I said, "Yeah, I'm talking to him tonight."
That's
So
awesome.
yeah,
That's awesome.
so I think that positive, trying to talk about things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to thank our sheriff's department because, like I said, they were very helpful and very transparent. And I knew that I could trust my sheriff,
Mm-hmm.
that if there was something wrong that his deputies did, he was going to take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes people make bad choices, sometimes people
Absolutely.
make mistakes, and those have to be addressed.
Right.
But I also trusted him that if he said, "Hey, we did everything right," things just
We weren't prepared. We
things
didn't know.
yeah, it was out of our control.
Yeah.
We did the best we could with the information we had.
Right.
If he would have said that, I would have said, "I'm totally fine with that. Thank you very much."
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I had the opportunity to see the body cam, get
Yeah.
to talk to the deputies. I can see a lot of departments just being afraid of people wanting to sue
Mm-hmm.
right away without looking at the whole picture.
Yeah.
Or wanting to file a complaint,
Yeah.
or make a big deal out of
Yeah.
something that maybe it was a result of miscommunication or lack of information.
Yep. Well, it sounds like a
Yeah.
really well-run department. So kudos to the entire community there.
Yeah,
Very impressive.
it was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
And I'll update you later on how the training goes and how that gets developed. We've learned to embrace life.
Good.
And the
I love
motto
it.
at our home, the motto for our family is laugh at life or life will laugh at you. And that's how we've operated. That's how we've operated. And because sometimes life throws things that are just crazy.
Tell me. Thank you for that,
Yeah.
though. You made my day. So I appreciate it, Ricardo. Is there anything else you want to add to this?
No, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to allow me to tell my story from both ways. Just share about what it is being a parent of a child with a disability, autism, and being a member of the law enforcement community, and what challenges we have when both worlds collide.
Yeah. And it's more these conversations, I think the special needs community has an opportunity in lots of different areas where there's a lot of misunderstanding, to be the front ones to start to bridge the gaps of communication.
Yeah.
I think the mental health area is another very often misunderstood area of people with special needs have issues. So
yeah, it is. And sometimes we mix them up.
Exactly.
Mental health is not the same as special needs a lot of the time.
Right. And there's some areas where there's both, special needs people with mental health, it's just it's complicated, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, give my best to your family and to Ryan and your community. Thanks so much for being on, and have a good evening.
You're welcome. It's been fun, but it's been great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.